Competency questions are a type of question that are really common in law firm application forms as well as interviews. These sorts of questions are looking for whether you can demonstrate a particular skill or characteristic that law firm is looking for, and these can differ from firm to firm. In this video, I'm going to go over 3 ways that you can approach these sorts of questions to make sure you're answering them in a clear and structured way. If you don't really have a structure that you're following for this sort of question, it's easy to just give an answer that's too short and doesn't really give enough information. Or on the other hand, you might end up rambling and maybe cover the information that they're looking for, but also give a lot of other extra information that will just make your answer lose focus and be less useful to the recruiter. As I said earlier, these sorts of questions can come up in your written application or even in an interview, but the process to answering them is pretty much the same either way. So first of all, you'll need to figure out whether the question you've been asked is even a competency question. And the best way to do that is to just get used to the way they look. So an example of a typical competency question could be something like, tell us about a time that you worked as part of a team. And that'll be testing for the competency of teamwork. Another one could be something like, tell us about a time where you juggled multiple obligations at once. And that could be looking for time management, or it could be looking for organisation. You can see that each question is focused on 1 or 2 competencies that firm will find important. And each firm will have its own specific competencies that it's looking for in its lawyers. Most of the time you'll be able to find this on the firm's recruitment page, because they'll mention the key competencies or the key qualities that they're looking for in their applicants. But if you can't find a specific list to the firm that you're applying to, here's a general list of the competencies that law firms are usually looking for in their candidates. So there are a few different ways that you can deal with these sorts of questions. And in this video, I'm going to go over 3 different structures: STAR, CAR, and BAC. The most common format for answering competency questions is STAR. And this stands for situation, task, action, result, and reflection. So for situation, you want to explain the situation you were in, and you should aim to answer the questions: what were you doing, where was it, when was it, things like that. So imagine you'd been asked a competency question that was looking for you to demonstrate your teamwork. Your answer for the situation part could be something like this. In my second year of university, I was part of the Law Society committee. The committee organised a textbook sale for the law students, which was taking place in the following week. We'd received many books from students wishing to sell them through the book sale. So you can see in that answer, I've mentioned what I was doing, where it was, and when it was. Next, you've got task. And here you want to outline the task you're working on or the challenge that you faced. So following on from the same example before, your answer to this section might be something like, I was tasked with creating a system to record the information of each person who was selling a book and the books they had given us to sell. Next, you've got action. And here you want to focus on what you did to help meet the objectives of that task. And it's really important not to undersell yourself here, because action is probably the biggest part of the whole STAR structure, where you can really demonstrate that you have this quality that they're looking for. You might also want to talk about how you did that thing and what skills you used. And remember, it's about what you did. So make sure you use the word I in there at some stage. So if we're going to carry on from that book sale example when I was trying to demonstrate teamwork, the action section might look something like this. To make sure that we met the deadline, I created a Google Sheets spreadsheet which was accessible by every member of the team. We then divided the books among us to input the data into the spreadsheet, supporting each other whenever a team member had other priorities. Finally, you've got the result, and here you want to mention what the outcome actually was. And you should also mention whether you made a difference. Hopefully you did make a difference, because if you didn't, then ditch that example and choose a different example where you have actually made a difference to that task. And also quantify the difference that you made. So by this I mean use a number in your answer that represents the difference that you made or the benefit that was gained because of what you did. So again, going back to that same example of the book sale and how we showed teamwork, your answer could say, we worked effectively as a team to complete the data entry for all of the books before the event. As a result of our effective teamwork in logging all of the necessary information, we were able to sell over 80% of the books which were given to us. Notice I use the quantifier here, 80%, which represents the fact that we managed to do a brilliant job and sell a majority of the books that were given to us. This is the sort of way you can quantify the results in your answer, which makes your answer way more interesting, specific, and real. So I definitely say it's worth putting the time to think about how you can quantify the benefit that your actions actually had in this results section. Now you've got STAR all noted down, and the final section is that second R, which stands for reflections. And here you want to talk about how the task went, what you did well, and more importantly, what you could do better. So you might think that talking about what you could do better means that actually you didn't do very well, and it's accepting that you did something badly, but that's not the case at all. In fact, I think that talking about where you could have done better shows that you're self-aware and you know that you have limitations and bits that you can improve on. It comes across way more authentic and much more realistic than just saying that there's no way that you could have improved. And by demonstrating that you're willing to be critical with yourself, look at the way you've done stuff in the past and kind of think about how you could do it better, grad recruitment will be really pleased to see that sort of characteristic in an applicant. So following on from that same book sale example, the reflections on that answer could be something like this. While the book sale was a success, in future I believe that the process could be improved by opening the textbook drop-offs earlier for students. This would enable the committee to log the books while working under less time pressure. The second structure that we're going to look at for competency questions is CAR, and this stands for context, action and result. And you can also add the reflections bit like we did last time with STAR. And the main difference between STAR and CAR is actually quite small. In CAR, all you've done is take that situation and task bit from STAR and just merge it into one thing called context. In the context section, all you're doing is setting the scene and just giving context to the situation that you were in. If you had an example asking for when you showed initiative, your answer could be something like this. Last summer, I worked as a retail assistant in a clothing shop in my hometown. During a busy Christmas period, one of my colleagues didn't turn up for a shift without giving any notice. This left us with only 2 members of the team on the shop floor. As a result, we were understaffed to deal with the number of customers that we were expecting that day. So you can see that this is kind of just blended that situation and task bit from the STAR framework, just to give a bit of a background as to where your answer is starting from. Next, you've got action, which is again the same as before. You're talking about what you did to meet that objective or complete that task. So for this retail example where you've been asked to show initiative, your answer could say, I contacted one of our other colleagues who was not scheduled to work that day, and they agreed to come in. In the meantime, as customers entered the shop, I informed them that queries might take slightly longer to deal with today, so that any delays were not unexpected for them. Next up, you've got result, and again it's the same as before. You have to talk about how you made a difference, and if you can, really try and quantify that difference in some way. So your answer could be, as a result of my initiative, we were only short-staffed for the first 2 hours of the 9-hour opening period. This meant that we were able to run effectively without a significant negative impact on customer service or sales that day. You can see here that I managed to quantify the amount of time that we were left short-staffed by saying we were only short-staffed for 2 hours out of the whole 9-hour opening period. So that's a sort of example of how you can try and quantify an answer that you might think is quite difficult to put into numbers. Finally, you've got reflection. And again, just like before, this is what you did well and more importantly, what you could do better. So in this example, you could say, I believe that I handled the problem effectively at the time. In future, this problem could be reduced by checking staff members' availability the day before their shift, particularly during busy periods. This is a suggestion that I made to my manager afterwards. Finally, you've got the back structure, which is a bit of a random one and I'd never heard about it before. But I saw it for the first time shared by Hannah, who runs the 411 blog on Instagram. You can head over to Instagram to check out her post about this structure and a bunch of other useful stuff. And BACK stands for background, action, consequences and knowledge. The background section is similar to context in CAR or situation and task in STAR. You're just giving a bit of background for the answer so you can then develop on it in the next sections. Action is the same as before. You're talking about what you did to help resolve that problem. Consequences is the same as result from the 2 structures that we looked at before. So you want to look at what the actual outcome was and whether you can quantify it in any way. And finally, you've got knowledge, where you can talk about learning points that you took from this experience, and you can kind of just fold in reflections into this stage as well. So now we've gone through all 3 frameworks, STAR, CAR and BACK. And you might be thinking, which one of these is best for what sort of situation? Is there one that's better or is there one that's worse? And the answer to that is no. I think that it's just completely up to you and what you prefer. If you look at it basically, they're all just structures or frameworks for your answer. So they're not really good or bad in that way. As well as that, I'm sure you'll have noticed that they're actually quite similar if you compare them. Personally, what I did is that I used STAR when it came to my written applications because I like separating them out into more defined sections of situation, task, action, and result. But when it came to interviews, either real life interviews or video interviews or whatever it was, I usually just went with CAR because I found it simpler to just talk about the context before jumping into the action and result, as opposed to talking about the situation and task and separating those two out. Because under the pressure of the interview and you're all nervous and everything, it might be a bit difficult to think of this was the situation and this was the task. So I'd kind of just buy myself a bit of time, generally talk about the context and just split it into 3 sections instead of 4. I also didn't use back because, as I said, I literally just learned about that a few weeks ago from Hannah's blog, but that's another one that she said that she finds useful, so it depends on what works for you. Another thing that I wanted to add is that I never did that last R, reflection section, because I just didn't know it existed. I found out about it well after I did my applications and interviews, but I think it's really useful to include. This is because it comes across very honest and authentic, and it shows you're willing to be critical about yourself, which is really, really important in an applicant and as a trainee as well. So if I was doing interviews again now, I definitely would use that last R section to reflect on my answer and say things that I could have done better. Finally, I want to talk about something that I know a lot of candidates worry about, and that is what examples you should use for your competency questions. And a lot of people think that law firms just want to see legal work experience crammed into every section of the application form. So if they're asked about teamwork, they want to talk about work experience that they did, or if they're asked about innovation, they want to talk about when they were innovative in a work environment or something like that, because they think it's just more suitable to use that in the application form. But that's just not the case. I'd say the best thing to do is to draw from a range of experiences from all sorts of aspects of your life. It could be part-time work you've done in a bar, it could be side hustles, you might be running a blog, it might be something from your sports team. All of these different experiences can give you useful stuff that you can use in your competency answers. For example, something that I would talk a lot about is that because I've played music since I was young, whenever I was asked about determination or sticking at something or persevering with something, I'd usually just talk about that as opposed to examples that are more from professional contexts. And I think drawing from a wide range of experiences is super useful because it just makes you seem more interesting to the person on the other side of the table, and it shows you off as a more well-rounded person. So don't be stressed out if you don't have loads of legal work experience or professional work experience that you can use in your application answers, because I'd say that even if you have loads of legal work experience, trying to use a variety of different experiences from different aspects of your life is probably the best way to go. I've got another video where I talk about how you can identify your unique strengths and weaknesses, and you can check that out if you're stuck on what sorts of examples you should use for these sorts of questions. But one thing that you should do for sure is that before an interview, you should make sure that you've written a bunch of different examples down on a sheet of paper that match up to the qualities or competencies that you think are the main ones for that firm. And then just pick one of the structures that we've gone through today, STAR, CAR, back, whatever works for you, and plan those answers in that structure. That way, when it comes to interview, you're going to have well-prepared answers that are structured, that have quantified results, and that will come across really strong. So that brings us to the end of this video on how to answer competency questions. I hope you've enjoyed this and found it useful. Let me know what you thought by leaving a thumbs up or a thumbs down or a comment under this video. If you're doing applications right now, consider subscribing because I'm going to keep on putting application related content out in the future too. I've also got an Instagram page where I post updates and get ideas for other videos. So follow me there if you want, and send me a message if you've got an idea for a video you want me to cover that I've not done yet. Anyway, I hope you found this helpful, and I'll catch you next time.